Hi there, in this video I'm going to start looking at the line knight f3, f6, knight c3. This is one of the big main lines after knight f3, and a lot of theories built up on this line because it's been popular for a very long time. There's actually another video series on YouTube already, it looks at least part of this opening complex by the very strong player Onubense. I'm going to put some links to the relevant videos that he's made in the comments, and I'm probably going to reference it several times during this video and also during other videos. Those videos are definitely worth watching. They are in Spanish, so if you don't speak Spanish you might not understand everything that's he's talking about in there. But I don't speak Spanish, and I definitely learned quite a lot from those videos, and he gives some very interesting and strong moves. So without further ado, I'm going to recommend the move here, knight to h6. It may seem that with white threatening both these knight jumps that c6 would be the best move, and it's certainly the most natural move. But after e3, white has all kinds of threats, bringing out the queen and the bishop in combination with knight sacrifices, and it turns out that black has no real good defence. There are a couple of lines which almost work, but almost is the most important word in that sentence, and ultimately white's doing very well there, so I can't really recommend that for black. Knight h6 on the other hand is kind of a natural counter-attacking move, threatening to play knight to g4, which would win the game immediately if black can get that in next time. But obviously white's not going to allow it to do that, and he has a few options, and the one I'm going to cover in this video, which is the most popular move, is knight to e5. I don't think it's the most critical, but it's definitely the most popular, and it forces black to capture back with the pawn on e5 and leaves weaknesses around black's king now that he's given away the f-pawn. I remember many years ago when I first came up with this idea of playing knight to e5, I thought of playing it in combination with the move to h3, and the idea was that you're kind of taking g4 under control and threatening both these knight jumps to b5 and d5. And a lot of my opponents played the move c6, which is a mistake, and white gets a really good play with d4 threatening bishop to g5. A couple of options black has here, so knight f7 controlling that square, e4, and white just has too much with queen f3, maybe bishop g4 and queen h5, knight d5, all these kind of ideas that what black has to take into account, and he doesn't have an adequate defence. And probably the best move, which shows just how bad black's position is to play knight back to g8 in preparation to play knight to f6 in response to bishop g4, bishop g5. But after e4 again, white just has too much play with ideas of knight d5, queen h5, and just a very strong initiative. Unfortunately, I didn't keep on winning games forever in that line, because black players started cottoning on to the fact that e6 is a much better defence, counter-attacking with the idea of queen h4, and or maybe queen f6 is also a threat. And I basically couldn't really find a good way for white to play here. I don't think there is one. If white tries to go for knight b5, which does cover the d4 square, but queen f6 is unfortunately too strong here, and after f3, queen f4, and if f4 then simply queen over this way, and white simply weakened himself too much along this diagonal. Instead, white should probably play the move e3, but this gives black time to pin the knight down with bishop b4, and if white tries to win a piece with queen to g5, if the bishop was still on f8 this would win a piece, but in this case black has time for castling, hitting f2, and then playing rook f6 with the threat of knight g4, and black's doing very well. Instead of h3, other moves which try to prevent knight g4, like g4, are in fact even worse after e6 because this really weakens this diagonal, and f3 also is even worse because black's now threatening knight g4 and queen to h4, and black's got very good counterplay, more than enough. This line kind of went out of fashion for a long time because of this reason, that white couldn't stop black from playing knight g4, and therefore it seemed black's going to get enough play, and white players didn't want to allow it. And it eventually came back into fashion when Onubense started playing it a lot on Buho 21, especially with the move e4, which I'm going to take as the main line. Before I get to that, I'll just mention a couple other moves as well. The move e3 is one possibility, but I don't think it's quite as natural as e4. And after knight g4, c6 in the same way, I think white would just much rather have the pawn on e4 than on e3. It basically kind of blocks in this bishop, which can kind of help white in some cases. The only real reason I can see for white to play this way instead would be if he wanted to play the move bishop d3, but it doesn't really work after g6. Black's now threatening these kind of knight jumps into f2, and I don't think white really has much choice. He has to go ahead with the move f5, and then after e6, opening up both the queen, not immediately coming to h4 because of the g4 knight, but at some point that queen out there might be useful, and also bishop b4. I think black's doing quite well here. I'm not going to go into more detail on that. If f6, then simply bishop b4, and if f7, then the king is quite safe just going to f8. And black's doing very well there. White probably has better options than that, but even so, black is doing quite well. The other move I want to mention is d4. This for a while was quite popular, but I think it's actually a mistake. After knight g4 and e6, black has too much play. White's obvious moves are bishop g5 and knight b5. Knight b5 can be quite easily refuted by knight to f2, queen d3, and it looks complicated with queens on pre here, but after bishop b4, c3 captures, it turns out white is simply lost because he can't capture the queen back because of rook c8 with a win for black. So he should basically, well, it was resignable already. Instead of knight b5, slightly more testing is bishop g5, but then again after queen f6, this can't be captured because of black wins the game with knight to e3. So white's best try is probably just to play knight b5 again. Now black doesn't have the same win as before, but he can play knight to e3, and after captures a6. And if white doesn't capture on c7, then he's admitted his opening as a failure. And if he does capture, then bishop d6, hitting h2, and it turns out that white can't actually block this, because if he tries with g3, then bishop takes g3 is a very strong move, threatening queen h4, and after h4 queen f4 wins, and if rook g1, slightly more robust defence from white, but still after rook f8 it turns out that rook takes f3 is just too big a threat, and white's losing. So it turns out that g3 is not possible, therefore white simply has to allow black to capture, maybe with e3, bishop takes, g3, and black has a material advantage, like the move queen f5 here I think is a good move, and really white's going to be trying to grovel for a draw here with the material imbalance, and probably won't succeed. I think black's got good chances to win. So d4 is, I think that's essentially a refutation of that line. And for the remainder of this video I'm going to focus on the move e4, which is the move that all the strong players play and has traditionally caused black the most headaches. After knight g4, f4, c6, black does have a couple of other options in those moves, but ultimately I don't think they're particularly good. Black should play this way, which is the most natural way. And here, the most critical move, or the move that's been considered the most critical move, is h3. It turns out I think black's actually got a lot of decent options there, but I'm going to take that as the main line because it's the move that pretty much all the strong players play in this position. There are other moves that are tried. There are lots of kind of trappy lines here that white can try. I'm going to refer to Onubense's video for most of them. I recommend basically to play in the same way. So if knight d5 to capture, and then after d4 I like the move e6, opening up again both these diagonals, aiming to develop quickly. It also threatens to immediately jump with the knight to f2, and white has to deal with all this stuff. And I think white has to play very accurately to kind of keep the balance. I think if he could take a few mistakes, then, or even one mistake, black can really pounce. Because this knight on g4 is so strong, I would rather be black here in a practical game. And sometimes white players play d4 immediately, and again I just think e6 straight away, opening up these diagonals is a good option for black. And again I'm going to refer you for these lines to look at Onubense's video, which will be in the description. So the rest of the video I'm going to focus on the move h3. In this position Onubense recommended to play g6, and then to develop this bishop out to h6, So after fg4, bishop h6, and this is the most popular line that black plays here, and I think it's a good option. But I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's already been covered, and I think black has three other good options, which I'm going to cover two of them briefly, and then one of them is my main option. My main option I'm going to take is to move e5, but also I think knight h2 is possible, and so is d6. I'm going to look at knight h2 first, because this is generally seen as being a mistake because of bishop a6, where white's threatening both queen here to here, and also bishop takes b7. But it turns out that after g6, bishop takes b7, e5, black has very good counterplay. He's threatening to play knight to knight f3 check, followed by queen h4, which would be very strong. And so white should probably capture on h2, get rid of that knight when he can. But then bishop h6, so threatening e takes f4, would play along this diagonal. White naturally answers d4, opening up this bishop to respond to this one. But then after castles, black again is threatening e takes f4, and it's not very easy for white to prevent this. In fact, I don't think he can. My main line goes d takes e5, so preventing the capture. But then after d5, black's now threatening to capture with the bishop, followed by, if it's blocked, then to capture on e4, with an exploding the defending piece. White can try and avoid that explosion by e5, but it still ends up being invaded along the f-file after this manoeuvre with the queen. Let's say queen f3, possibly queen takes g4 is probably more sensible. Queen f3, queen takes g3. Maybe white can, maybe black, can try pushing these pawns at some point and block with the king on e-file. So probably white should probably just take this, and then it's just going to end up in a draw by perpetual check, like so, which isn't a bad result for black from the opening, but also, I mean, there are different options there, but I think it shows that black has very good play, and it's an interesting option. A move that I like and that I've played a lot here is to move d6. I think this is a very good line for black. In fact, I was planning on putting this as my main line, but I kind of fell in love with e5 for reasons I'll show you in a little while. This move is mainly the reason that I stopped playing this opening as white so much, because I think traditionally the main line for white has been to play this sacrifice followed by f5, and this is sometimes considered to be good for white, especially as lots of players play knight f2 here, when after castles white has this really strong idea of playing queen f3 and f6, but black has this very strong move e5 here, and I'm going to leave it at this point, but I've played some games on either side here, and I think black is doing quite well actually. I would actually rather be black already. So that's a very interesting option. Another option is e5, and this is what I'm going to give as my main recommendation. I like it for a few reasons. One is that it's very uncommon. I've played it a couple of times, but those are almost the only games in my database. So it's unlikely that your opponent will know it very well unless they've seen this video. Now, the games that I've played with it, they've either gone h takes g4, which is going to be my main line, and that should really be the most natural move because that's why white played h3. But sometimes they do play the knight sacrifice, so knight b5 or knight d5. If knight b5, I think bishop b4 followed by castles gives black a very good play along the f-file. H takes g4 can be answered by h6, and again this threat to open up the f-file, I think black is doing quite well. d5 is another option that can come with the bishop coming out to g4, and I already like black's counterplay, and I prefer to be black here. So I don't recommend knight b5, and if knight d5, then again I think black's doing quite well with, I think black's doing very well actually with the move knight to h2. White can't give this rook away because he's given up too much material and he doesn't have an immediate win after c takes d5. So he should keep the material and play bishop e2 probably, but even so, after knight to f1, d4, knight e3, I think black's doing very, very well. If bishop takes e3, then black can simply swap these queens off like this, followed by taking the knight in some way and have a very good position. And if white takes the other way, then again I recommend just developing the queen out and swapping the queens off. Swapping the queens off like this, and then it seems that white may be getting some play along the f-file because these pieces are kind of blocked in. But after the important move b6 followed by bishop a6, covering the f1 square, then I think black's doing very well, and the material advantages are going to tell in the long run. So I don't think knight d5 is challenging at all. I think really the only challenging move is h takes g4. But here black does have to be accurate. If he plays kind of routinely with h5, I think he can get into a bit of trouble after the standard knight d5 sacrifice. Because after these moves, let's say bishop b4, aiming to castle quickly, f5, I think black is under quite a lot of pressure. One idea for white is to play bishop h6 followed by queen c1, and I think basically white just has very good attacking chances here, and I wouldn't want to be black. So instead of h5, black should instead play the move d5, opening up this bishop and threatening to come to g4. Actually, the only games that I've seen from getting to this position are where white has actually blundered with g4, which seems like the natural option, but then after e takes f4, threats of queen f6 and queen g5, turns out that black is actually pretty much winning immediately, and so you might get some free wins there if white routinely plays g4. Instead, white should play queen h5, but now we're just following my analysis. I haven't seen any games in this position, but in my analysis I found a really nice idea for black here. After g6, queen h4, it's actually possible to play queen takes h4. I don't think that's a bad move, but it's definitely not as nice as the move queen to f6, which is a lovely queen sacrifice. And if white takes this, then bishop h6 simply wins for white. If white tries to block this, then simply rook f8, invading down the f-file. So white can't capture there. And if he simply swaps off the queens, trying to stop black from opening an f-file, then black gets very good play with bishop g4. It's a clear advantage for black. So white has to really do something, and it's not quite clear what he can do. The most natural move to my mind when I first looked at this position actually allows black another nice tactical shot. And the first one I looked at was f5, and it turns out queen g5, again sacrificing the knight. It's kind of like a nice queen shimmy, sacrificing the queen on f6 and then sacrificing it again on g5. And once again, if this is captured, then bishop h6 along this diagonal just kills white. And let's say if he blocks with the queen, then again rook f8 wins. And if pushing a d-pawn, then the king's just going to be dragged out into the open, and it's just going to be quite a simple win. It's going to get hunted down with these bishops, and then followed by the rook, and black's going to win. So I just think that line's really nice, playing queen f6, sacrificing the queen, and then after f5, queen g5. Unfortunately, that's not completely forced, but that would be nice. I mean, if you get any games with that, then please let me know, and let me know how good it feels, because I was hoping to get a chance to play it myself and haven't done. But probably white's more accurate defence is bishop e2. So this is taking control of the g4 square, and also moving the bishop away from this nasty f-file. And here I think black has a couple of good options. One good option is to play bishop h6. I think this leads to probably more kind of equal positions. White should take the queen on f6. If white tries to be a bit clever and try and play something like queen h5, in fact it's not really particularly clever, because if black wanted to he could just play queen h4, but even better is queen f8. And black's doing very well, because if white castles now, then bishop h3, g takes, opening up the g file, and black is winning there. Bishop h3 is a nice tactical idea. So white should really exchange the queens, and this basically is a justification of queen f6 now, because if black had captured on h4 straight away, he would have lost the tempo. So this shows that queen f6 is actually not just a flashy move, but also a strong move. And after castles, black can simply develop perhaps with knight d7, and the position's kind of balanced. Maybe white will play something like d3, and then after king 8, black can play king h8, and the position's about equal material, and chances for both sides. A more kind of interesting option for black is after bishop to e2, queen f6, bishop e2, is to play the move e takes f4. So this is thematic as well, just opening up the f file. And now after queen takes f6, white seems like he's faster to the f file because he's immediately coming here with the rook, maybe with castles or just rook f1 directly. And black has to be accurate and play bishop g4, and then after if white captures this, then play bishop c5, which is a nice move. Again, if this gets captured, then black will quickly play rook f8. So white should probably take this, but then after bishop f2, black's got a lot of good play. So possibly white shouldn't capture on g4 and should play bishop f3 instead. This is kind of actually a nice move, bishop f3, setting a kind of horrible trap for black, because d takes c4 is actually very risky now, as after castles, threatening down the f file, bishop f5, white can either draw the game by repeating with the rook, or probably play the stronger move, at some point playing knight to e4, or maybe even d4 in this position. So knight e4 looks kind of nice coming in with these squares, and if d4, then now black's threatening to come here and maybe push d5. And I think black is up material, but I really wouldn't want to play this position as black. I think he's going to come under some nasty pressure. And of course white could simply draw the game if he wanted to. Instead of d takes e4, so I think bishop h6 is a better option. And now after, let's say, castles, I think we reach a kind of interesting position now. Again, materials level with chances for both sides. Black's development looks slightly easier, but also white with this pawn maybe will get a chance to push it. Or I don't think white's any worse here either. So I think chances for both sides is a fair enough assessment. And yeah, I think it's just an interesting position to play. So if you like the look of this line, I hope you do, then I hope you have some good fun playing it. If not, then I think d6 and knight h2 are also good options. So plenty of good ideas for black there, and good luck playing the line, and I hope you enjoyed the video.